After my grandpa's death, my parents sent me to Alpha call center job, saying you'll never be anything more. My manager called me useless daily. Until I got a call from a lawyer saying, your grandfather left you the entire company you're working for. My boss went silent. I, 25 female now, grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. Our family wasn't rich, but we were never really struggling either. My dad, Martin, was a high school math teacher. My mom, Dolores, taught third grade for over a decade before switching to admin work in the same school district. They were proud of that. They'd talk about how people like us make a difference, salt of the earth, never needed handouts, etc. I used to admire them, but somewhere along the line, they started seeing me as a disappointment. Growing up, I wasn't the kid who won spelling bees or starred in school plays. I was quiet. I loved reading and sitting with my thoughts. I'd draw floor plans for fun, read financial magazines, and dream of working in an office like my grandfather, August Krauss. He was my mother's father, a no-nonsense, old-school businessman who started his own telecommunications company in the 80s and built it from a small local operation into Krauss Connect, a firm that handled B2B call routing, tech outsourcing, and regional customer support. Not flashy, but solid. He never remarried after my grandma passed, and he never treated me like I was less than. If anything, he made me feel like I was the only one he could count on. Every summer, starting when I was 12, I'd go into the city with him to his main office in Minneapolis. It was located in one of those old but renovated buildings downtown, lots of exposed brick and metal, a mix of old architecture and startup culture. He'd let me sit in on meetings, organize paper files, even answer phones under supervision. I loved it. Not for the work itself, but for how alive it felt. People solving problems, talking fast, drinking too much coffee. I watched, listened, and asked questions. I absorbed everything. He'd say, you've got a sharp mind, kid. You could run this place one day. I thought maybe I would. But then college happened. I started a business admin program at the University of Minnesota on a scholarship that, I would later find out, my grandfather quietly arranged. I didn't make a big deal about it. I just wanted to earn my place. Then, halfway through my third year, he got sick. Really sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was fast and ugly. I spent every weekend by his side. I'd read the Star-Tribune business section to him, and even when he was fading, he'd smile and say, read me the markets. What's oil doing? He wasn't afraid of dying. He just hated leaving things unfinished. I think that included me. He passed away in early October. I was devastated. At the funeral, my parents were oddly formal. Not emotional, not affectionate. Just stiff and efficient. That should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. 2 weeks later, they sat me down in the kitchen and told me they were cutting me off financially. You're not finishing school, my father said. No emotion, just finality. What? Why? The scholarship was through your grandfather. It's over now. I'll take out loans, I said. I can figure something out. No, you won't, my mother snapped. It's time you joined the real world. They handed me a brochure, Midwestcom Solutions, call center open interviews this week. I thought it was a joke. You're serious? I said. It's a job, my father said. It's more than you deserve after the way you've coasted all these years. That word, coasted, broke something inside me. I had never felt so small. The next week, I put on an old blouse and black slacks, borrowed my mom's car, and drove to a low-rise office building on the edge of Bloomington. The call center looked like a DMV that never got renovated, stained carpet, buzzing fluorescent lights, half-empty cubicles. My interview lasted 10 minutes. They didn't even ask me about my education. They handed me a headset and gave me a login. I was officially hired as call center associate inbound services. What they didn't tell me was that Midwestcom was actually a subsidiary of Krauss Connect, my grandfather's company. One of their cost-cutting regional centers, mostly meant to service overflow and low-level accounts. I only recognized it after seeing some interoffice memos referencing internal departments I remembered from the Minneapolis HQ. My boss, Harold Lintz, was the kind of man who made you feel like you were always wasting his time. Mid-50s, round in the middle, red in the face. He talked to everyone like they were idiots, but he seemed to reserve a special flavor of contempt just for me. Slow again, huh, Leora? Maybe don't think so hard, it's not quantum physics. Useless. That's what you are. I told myself I'd quit. I told myself every day for months. But I didn't. I needed the money, sure. But I also had this sick sense of needing to prove something. To my parents. To myself. To the version of me that my grandfather believed in. That's what kept me going. A few months in, one of the older women on the floor, Jeannie, who worked mornings and had a soft spot for me, pulled me aside and said, "Your grandpa used to stop by this branch. Told me once you were the smartest one in the family." Funny how things turn out. I wanted to cry. But then came the call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Snow outside, phones ringing endlessly, Harold being his usual loud and miserable self. My personal cell rang between calls. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway, half expecting another bill collector. "Miss Leora Krause?" "Yes, my name is Elias Mendelssohn. I'm an attorney with Mendelssohn and Harth. I'm calling regarding the estate of August Krause." I stood up. What? "There was a delay in the execution of your grandfather's will due to a private trust arrangement. But I'm pleased to inform you that you are now the majority shareholder of Krause Connect Incorporated." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're saying I own the company?" "Yes. All of it, actually. 82% of shares. Including all branches and subsidiaries. That includes your current place of employment, Midwest Com." I couldn't breathe. He sent over the documentation that same day, official papers, stock certificates, sealed letters in my grandfather's handwriting. Apparently, he had moved everything into a trust managed by this firm, with instructions not to reveal it until after a specific legal milestone. My parents knew. And they hid it from me. Deliberately. That weekend, I drove to Minneapolis and met with Elias in person. We went over everything. My rights, my authority, the board structure. He said my grandfather had named me successor CEO if I ever wanted it, but it was optional. "You were always the one he trusted," Elias said. "It took me 4 days to decide what to do. And then I made a plan. I showed up at work Monday like normal. Walked into Harold's office without knocking. 'I need to talk to you,' I said. 'Make it quick,' he muttered, eyes glued to his screen. I dropped the papers on his desk. He scanned them. Slowly. His face turned a weird shade of gray. He looked up. What is this?" "I'm the new owner of Krause Connect. Which means I own this company. And you're fired, effective immediately." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. It was the first time I'd ever seen him speechless. I walked out of that office with my head high, and every employee in that room watched me like I'd just flipped the script of their lives. In a way, I had. I didn't stop there. I brought in HR consultants. I evaluated performance reports. I cleaned the house. Half the toxic management was let go within the first month. I implemented new training systems, paid overtime, mental health support, and quarterly bonuses. We changed our scheduling system and gave people more flexibility. The branch is still operational today, and I visit every 2 weeks. But the hardest part? That was still coming. Because I had to confront my parents. I invited them over for dinner, just me. They showed up expecting a casual catch-up. Instead, I showed them the documents. My mother looked like she'd been hit with a shovel. My father just sighed like he was disappointed again. "You knew," I said. "You knew what he left me. And you tried to bury me anyway." "We didn't think you were ready," my mother muttered. "You mean you didn't want me to be?" They left without finishing their wine. We haven't spoken since. My brother Reed reached out months later. He wanted a job at HQ. I gave him one. He quit after 2 weeks. Too much pressure, apparently. And me? I'm still figuring it out. I'm not perfect. I have a therapist. I still flinch when people raise their voice. But every morning I walk into that building, the one Grandpa built from the ground up, I know I earned it. I may have started at the bottom, but now I stand exactly where he always knew I'd be. And I did it on my own terms. People like to imagine that getting power or money somehow flips a switch in your life, like the minute I found out I owned the company, everything just magically got better. But that's not what happened. What happened was, I didn't sleep for the first 2 weeks. I had a panic attack in my own kitchen after I got the official documents in the mail. Just me, a kettle I forgot on the stove, and the slow creeping realization that I was now responsible for over 200 employees, people with lives, mortgages, student loans, children. And despite what the paperwork said, I still felt like the 21-year-old girl sitting at her kitchen table being told she was useless. I couldn't just fire Harold and expect the system to fix itself. I had to actually learn what my grandfather had been doing all those years, beyond the surface-level memories I had from my summer visits. I had to become someone who could sit at a boardroom table and not feel like an imposter. So I worked. Quietly and obsessively. I hired a transitional executive team, people from within the company who had been overlooked for years but had solid records and a reputation for fairness. I asked them honest questions. I admitted what I didn't know. That shocked people at first. They weren't used to that from management. The legal firm set me up with a business mentor, an old partner of my grandfather's named Darrell Young. He was sharp as a tack, in his 70s, and had zero patience for excuses. "You're too smart to waste time second-guessing yourself," he said. "If you're going to lead, lead." Darrell didn't sugarcoat anything. He taught me how to read income statements line by line, how to audit teams without killing morale, how to build loyalty with transparency, not fear. I took notes. I asked for feedback. I stayed up until 3 a.m. reading legal codes and HR compliance guides. The first big challenge came when one of the old regional directors, Margot Chin, challenged my authority at a shareholders meeting. She didn't outright say she didn't respect me, but she danced around it with enough condescension to make it clear she thought I was just a placeholder. "I assume you'll be naming an experienced executive to actually run things soon," she said, faux concerned. I took a breath. Everyone was watching. "No," I said. "I'll be running it. But if you'd like to offer support, I'd be happy to hear it." She blinked like she wasn't expecting me to stand my ground. That was the first time I felt the weight shift in a room like that. Quiet, but undeniable. A few weeks later, I implemented a salary audit across departments and found that several women and BIPOC employees were being consistently underpaid compared to their counterparts. That was a firestorm. The old guard hated it. Said I was pandering, overcorrecting, rocking the boat. But then the employees started talking. Quiet thank you messages started coming in. People who'd been invisible for years felt seen for the first time. That's when I realized this company wasn't just a job. It was a platform. And I wasn't just managing something my grandfather built. I was reshaping it into what he always believed it could be. I started a Voices from the Floor initiative, where anyone in the company, regardless of position, could submit feedback, ideas, or complaints directly to my office without going through their chain of command. Anonymous, if they wanted. Every Friday, I'd read them personally. Some were petty. Some were heartbreaking. One I'll never forget was from a janitor named Clifford. He'd worked at the Minneapolis building for 16 years and had never once spoken to upper management. His message read, "No one's ever asked me what I think. I think your grandpa would be proud." I cried in my car for 20 minutes after reading that one. It was during this time that I also started running into people from my past, former classmates, old neighbors, even old teachers, who'd somehow heard what had happened. Most were supportive. Some weren't. One girl I used to know from high school, Danica, DM'd me on LinkedIn asking if I was hiring. We'd never been close, and she wasn't especially kind to me back then. But I offered her an interview. She didn't show up. Typical. Then came the media attention. Some local business blogs picked up the story, "Young woman inherits telecom giant after starting as call center worker." They left out the family betrayal part, but the headline alone was enough to send my inbox into a spiral. Journalists. Podcasters. Influencers. People who thought I was some kind of corporate Cinderella story. But what they didn't see was what came after that article went live. My mother. She called. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in over a year. "Hi, sweetie." I nearly dropped my phone. Her voice was so fake, I almost laughed. "Don't call me that," I said. She paused. "I just saw the article. You look beautiful in that picture." There was no apology. Just a strange sort of performative pride, like she was angling to remind me we were related, maybe hoping I'd forgotten everything she said to me in that kitchen when she handed me the job flyer. I asked her, flat out, why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me what Grandpa left? She sighed. Because he was spoiling you. And we thought you needed a dose of reality. You gave me abandonment, not reality. Silence. I did what I thought was best, she said, her voice low and tight. I didn't respond. I blocked her number that night. As for my father, he never reached out. He never even acknowledged what happened. And honestly, I think I prefer that. At least it's consistent. It's strange, grief doesn't just disappear. Even now, years later, I still miss Grandpa. There are days I walk past the break room in our HQ and half expect him to be standing there with a thermos of lukewarm coffee and a newspaper tucked under his arm. He always called me kiddo. No matter how old I got. If he saw me now, I think he'd smirk and say, "Told you you had it in you." I kept his office mostly intact. Updated the tech, but kept the layout, his old books, even the leather chair he used to spin me around in as a kid. There's a photograph on his desk, him holding me on his shoulders, both of us grinning like fools outside the old company building. It's my North Star. When I doubt myself, I look at that picture. But the most surreal part? It's running into the employees who knew me back then, back when I was a 10-year-old kid holding a clipboard and pretending to be in charge. One of them, a senior engineer named Mikhail, walked into a board meeting one day, looked at me, and said, "You used to steal the jelly beans from the break room. Now you're the CEO." I grinned. Don't tell accounting. They'll retroactively dock my pay. There was laughter. Real laughter. Moments like that keep me going. Because for all the weight on my shoulders, for all the pain my parents caused, and for all the ways I doubted myself, I now have the kind of purpose I didn't know I was even allowed to want. A few weeks ago, a letter showed up at my office. Not an email. Not a call. A letter, handwritten in thick, neat cursive on yellow stationery. No return address. Inside, a folded note and a check. The check was made out to me, personally. $8,320. I didn't understand it at first. But the note explained everything. Leora, this is the amount your parents collected from your grandfather's estate in personal advances that were meant for your college tuition. We didn't know at the time that he had redirected ownership to you. We just knew he was making arrangements. When he passed, we found documents he had left in his home office, drafts of the trust, letters about the future of the company. We thought we had time to stop it. We didn't. I won't defend what we did. I know it was cruel. But if there is even a chance to repair some part of what we broke, I wanted to try. Use the money however you see fit. Or don't. I understand if you want nothing to do with us. Dolores, I sat in my office with that letter in my hand for hours. I read it over and over again. I hated how neat it was. How tidy it made their betrayal sound. Like it was just a misunderstanding or a lapse in judgment. As if they'd forgotten the months of condescension, the humiliation, the long silences over dinner, the sharp "you'll never be anything more." But I didn't rip it up. I didn't cash the check either. Instead, I had my assistant, Margot, track down their address. They had moved after Grandpa died, downsized into a condo in Egan, apparently. I wrote my own letter. Short. Clinical. Dolores, the money is being donated in your name to a scholarship fund I've set up for underprivileged girls interested in business and technology. It's called the August Fund. The first recipient is a 17-year-old named Sadaf. She reminds me of me, if I'd had someone believing in me from the start. She's going to do great things. That's how we fix what you broke. Goodbye, Leora. I never heard back. I didn't need to. What I needed, I already had: peace, purpose, and power. And something else, something more subtle but infinitely satisfying. About a month later, I was attending a panel on women in business leadership at the University of Minnesota. I was one of the featured speakers, sitting on a stage in front of a few hundred people. As I scanned the crowd, I noticed a familiar face near the back. My mother. She didn't try to talk to me afterward. Didn't approach the stage. She just sat there, quietly watching, then slipped out before the Q&A. But the look on her face said everything. It wasn't hate. It wasn't a regret. It was recognition. She finally saw me. And that was enough. That same evening, I returned to the Minneapolis office. I poured myself a small glass of scotch, the same brand Grandpa used to keep in the locked cabinet behind his desk. I raised it to the air, alone in his office, and whispered, I did it. Not out of pride, but out of completion. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is living exactly the life they told you you'd never be capable of, and thriving. And in that moment, surrounded by the company my grandfather built and I rebuilt, I realized something else. I wasn't living his dream anymore. I was living mine. And I'd only just begun.